I would 100% recommend that you try this yourself if you're establishing a food forest for the first time. There are so many steps in establishing a productive food forest from bare ground. Have you ever wondered what steps are really necessary and which things you can actually go without? Today I'm going to talk to you about the importance of establishing swales and berms and whether or not tilling before you plant your trees is really necessary, why I have chosen to do it, and what happens when you don't do it, because I have got some proof that it is well worth the effort. But first, let me show you what happens when you don't till and put in some swales and berms first. For some context, this ground was cleared forestry. It used to be covered in a pine plantation and it's been cleared for commercial gains, and we have bought it in its very rough, very dry, very barren state, and we have tried our very best to get a food forest system established in this particular area. It's about 1/4 acre, and despite us getting plenty of rainfall here, the hill that we've planted on is dry and barren and has lost a lot of its topsoil down into the gully just from erosion, and of course they've had all the heavy machinery over here, so it's very compacted and a lot of it is just pretty much straight up clay. Now down this bottom end of the food forest we actually didn't till and we didn't put in swales because honestly we thought it would be wet enough down here. There's often a bit of a pond that happens, and we thought the trees would actually kind of enjoy how damp it is down here compared to the dryness on the rest of the hill. Unfortunately, that is not actually the case. I really regret not putting some swales in down here because actually this ground in the middle of summer is incredibly dry as well, and the plants are clearly not thriving. So what happens when you don't till and don't put in swales in a new food forest? If you're like us, you're going to end up with plants that you've paid $50 a tree for and they look pretty much dead. Shortly I'll show you up the top of the food forest where we have tilled and we have put in swales and berms, and the plants up there are doing significantly better. But first I'm going to tell you what we're going to do to try and remedy down here without having to pull out the trees and fluff around with a tiller. The first thing I'm going to do is try and create some micro swales around the bottoms of these trees. This is when you dig in behind the tree to try and create a small swale, and then use that extra dirt to create a small berm around each individual tree. The thought is that even though this isn't quite as effective as doing a big swale and berm system, it's better than nothing, and it should catch at least some water and some rain and help sink it in around the trees. My brother-in-law has just had some sheep shorn and we have managed to get all the belly wool from those sheep, and belly wool makes a fantastic mulch around trees. It lasts a really long time, the microbes in the soil really enjoy it, it helps hold in any moisture that does manage to get in there, and it helps encourage the growth of the microbes and the fungi that the trees really need there so that they can thrive. Other options for mulch are obviously any kind of bark or wood mulch. Trees thrive in an environment which is fungal dominant, which means things that are really woody need fungus to break them down. They make a brilliant mulch around trees, but honestly if you can get any plant growing and chop and drop around them, they're going to be a lot better off than having naked bare soil. Once I've done both those things, my very next step is to add some seeds of some supporting species and some herbs and anything that's going to be fairly hardy and get established quickly. For me, I have just cut all of these branches out of my herb garden from all my plants that are going to seed up there. So I'm simply going to lay them around these trees and hope that they get established down here for next season. There's some calendula, some valerian, some parsley and a few other bits and pieces. The more different plants you get established in soil, the more variety of microbes you're going to end up with in the soil, because different plants exude different exudates which feed different types of fungi and different types of bacteria. And the bigger range you have, the more nutrition is going to be around for your plants to benefit from. The other thing you may be able to see from here is some red stakes we've got in the ground. Now these are areas that we are going to establish new trees over the coming winter. And underneath these stakes we've actually placed some animals. We had some ducks that we needed to dispatch, so we've buried those in there. So I'm going to pre-prepare those areas ready for some plants to go in there. I'm going to pre-mulch them. I'm going to pre-sow some plants around there, hopefully get those established before winter happens. This should help loosen up the soil, help establish those microbes and the fungus and the bacteria that we really want to be established in here before we even get the trees in the ground. Now, in the permaculture space, tilling is actually quite controversial. There's a lot of no-till gardens and a big no-till movement. But why is that? I've had some people ask me, oh, I didn't realise that tilling was so controversial. I do it all the time. Probably not in that voice, to be fair, it was written. But anyway, the thing with tilling is that it does have some positive things. Tilling definitely loosens soil and it adds oxygen into the soil, which boosts the bacterial life. This means that the bacteria go into hyperdrive and they start breaking down the carbon that's in the soil, releasing a huge amount of nutrients in a big flush. Tilling is really quick to do and it makes a really big impact on the soil and on the soil structure and on the overall look of an area. Tilling makes dirt moving so much easier, especially if you're building swales and booms. Trying to dig into the solid, hard, compacted ground took me about 3 hours to go about 3 feet or a metre. However, using the tiller, it took probably about 20 minutes to till it and probably another half hour to move all of that dirt across an entire swale. Tilling also loosens up the soil and gives lots of space for roots to grow really quickly out into the ground and get established really fast. So these all sound like really good things. So what's the downside? The downside really is when the bacterial life go into hyperdrive, they deplete the soil of carbon really quickly. The action of tilling itself can kill the worms that are in the soil already, and it can cause a really hard pan to form at the bottom of where the rotary blades are spinning round. That bottom area actually becomes more compacted. Over the long term, especially in established garden beds, no-till has been proven time and time again to be significantly more productive and to be better for the overall soil life as well. However, most no-till gardeners will still do an initial till first, and that's very much where we're at. We do a single big tilling session when we're getting garden beds established, and that means that we can till in any of the weeds or whatever that's on the top. We can till in some nutrition, we can loosen up the soil to start with, we can shape our beds and shape our pathways with great ease because the soil's so much looser. And then after that we don't till again, and we're doing the exact same thing in our food forest. We spent the time, marked out our swales on contour, which means that the divots, the bits where the water sits, sit pretty much exactly level, which means when it runs down the hill they land in there and sit there, which means they then soak into the nicely loosened berm soil. So when you plant on top of those, the trees get established much faster. You can get support species established much quicker. And if you mulch over the top of that, you have a really good answer for getting some plants established fast, even if the soil is pretty rubbish, which ours definitely was. Having seen the massive difference that tilling and making swales versus not tilling and not making swales has made in our food forest, I would 100% recommend that you try this yourself if you're establishing a food forest for the first time. If you didn't do it the first time, you can try these methods that I'm going to try around these plants to try and establish a lot of the benefits of the swales without actually having to do it themselves, without having to pull out those plants, and without having to rebuild the entire food forest from scratch again. Now, none of this is helpful if you haven't planned your food forest properly right from the beginning, so be sure to check out this video here on how to build your food forest correctly right from the start. Thanks for joining me today. I will see you in the next one.